So I'm going to talk about a new concept and a new protocol that we came up with called Bitcoin staking. So this Bitcoin staking sounds like some kind of oxymoron because Bitcoin is proof of work, staking is proof of stake. WTF. So, all right. So I'm going to explain it. Okay. All right. So at the heart of it, you can think of this is a new use case for Bitcoin. Okay. So let's retrace the history of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the first blockchain protocol. It is proof of work. And since then, many new protocols, new layer ones have arrived. And in the past few years, and all of them are proof of stake, okay? So here we have proof of work, Bitcoin, proof of stake, many blockchains. And if you look at the situation right now, it's kind of interesting because if you think about the whole crypto economy, it's about nearly 1 trillion economy. It's kind of split into two worlds. On the left-hand side, you have Bitcoin, which is about half, a little bit more than half the total crypto economy. And the other side is proof of stake. And frankly, there's little connection between the two. Most of the assets sitting here are idle, holding, and a lot of economic activities over there. Arbitrum is one good example. So what's going on? So it's a strange thing. And so we came up with recently a new use case for Bitcoin. The new use case of Bitcoin is to essentially turn Bitcoin into a staking asset to enhance additional security or to provide security to proof of stake systems. As we all know, proof of stake systems, including layer 1, layer 2, decentralized sequencers, all of these require staking. And we're saying that, hey, Bitcoin actually, as an asset, can be useful as a staking asset for all these systems. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. Sounds a bit radical because what's going on, right? Bitcoin, proof of work. First of all, Bitcoin's proof of work, but the asset is a crypto asset. It's electronic money. So as such, it can be used to provide capital for proof of stake network, number one. Number two, is that this idea of bringing in a foreign asset into a chain or a system to secure it is not totally new. Good example is my friend, collaborator, EigenLayer. EigenLayer brings the concept of restaking, and this is along those lines. And in other ecosystems like Cosmos, there's a concept of mesh security, which is one app chain stake asset securing another chain is along those lines. So this is part of that broader theme of security sharing. But the interesting about this idea is that Bitcoin, unlike all the earlier security sharing solutions, has no smart contract. And that makes a huge difference in terms of the technology of how to make this happen. Okay, so yeah, so this is the concept that we're building right now. It's called Bitcoin staking. So it is a two-sided market. Where on the left-hand side are Bitcoin holders. Anyone who has Bitcoins. It doesn't have to be miners. Anyone who holds Bitcoins can participate in this BTC, Bitcoin staking protocol. On the right-hand side, we have proof of stake systems. It could be layer 1, it could be app chains, it could be decentralized sequencers for rollups. Anything that needs stake for consensus can participate. All right. So two-sided, security from left to right, yield from right to left. Before I talk about the protocol, which is the focus of this event, let me talk a little bit about the economics. Why is this marketplace an interesting marketplace? Because if it's not an economically interesting marketplace, then no matter how good the consensus, the protocol is, it's kind of not very interesting. So before that, let me just, yeah, there's a very, very small range here, turns out. All right. Okay, so let's examine Bitcoin now, not only as a sort of a hold asset or a digital gold, but really think of it as a staking asset. What properties does it have? First, very interesting property is that unlike proof of stake asset like Ethereum, like ETH, or Avalanche, Ava, or any other proof of stake asset itself is unencumbered, which means it is actually not providing security for its own chain because Bitcoin is proof of work. So therefore, using it as a staking asset has one advantage over proof of stake asset is that there is no over leverage issue because it itself is not provide security. Number two, it is quite an idle asset. Our analysis of the usage of Bitcoin suggests that many people would buy Bitcoin and hold it for a long period of time without yield. So they're basically hoping for the value of Bitcoin to go up. Okay, so this is the digital gold analogy here. And therefore, because it's idle, it is therefore potentially easier to attract the asset as a staking asset. Number three is that it is also relatively, compared to particularly smaller chain asset, is less volatile. So low volatility is really good for staking, for security, because security, you want a stable foundation. You don't want your token to fluctuate a lot because security is as good as the weakest link. And four is that Bitcoin holders are very used to this concept of HODL. You buy and hold, okay? And that is a good thing for staking because for staking, you do want people to hold when you're staking. So you don't want to, in any site of fluctuation of the value of the token, immediately unstake. That would be bad for the chain. And finally, it is perhaps one of the most, or perhaps the most decentralized asset in terms of the variety of holders. So for any proof of stake chains, think about a new chain. If they want to create decentralization, it's quite good to bring in Bitcoin as an asset. All right. So based on these properties, we can conclude that there are reasons why two sides of this marketplace are interested. One, for Bitcoin holders, you can think of, they can hold Bitcoin. I'm trying to find an optimal position for this because first of all, I have to be within reach. Second of all, I can't block the projector. So I end up standing here. Great. All right. Hold Bitcoin and earn altcoin yield. So Bitcoin holders who love to hold Bitcoin can at the same time participate in the economy on the right-hand side and earn potential upside on altcoin. So think of it as an investment, but using the capital is not at risk to the volatility of the native asset. From the right-hand side, this Bitcoin can provide potentially a cheaper, more decentralized, more stable source of security. Perhaps, in addition, replacing the native asset. So if you look at many proof of stake chains, especially smaller ones, like app chains, we've talked to a lot of founders of app chains. What they have a lot of problem with is that when you launch a chain, you have to attract capital to stake. This capital is very expensive because your token is volatile. So you have to attract people to buy the token. You end up inflating the coin a lot. And in fact, 100% inflation is not unheard of. And that is actually bad for the long-term success of the project because you really want to preserve the value of the token to incentivize the application itself. So what we're saying here is that you could potentially replace or supplement your security budget using Bitcoin at a lower cost and more stability. At the same time, provide alignment to BTC holder. It is a good thing, potentially, for many projects. All right, so this sort of justifies why this marketplace that we're building, is a potentially interesting marketplace. So now, let's turn to the protocol. Okay, this is a workshop about consensus. So let's talk about the protocol. This BTC staking protocol is essentially a security sharing protocol. It is allowing BTC holders to stake to provide security to proof of stake systems. We have two constraints that we want to meet to build this protocol. when we set about designing this protocol. Number one constraint is that the stake should stay in a self-custodial contract on Bitcoin. Okay, this is a very important constraint because one reason why there's very limited economic activity between Bitcoin holders and proof of stake chains is because many of them do not trust bridges, do not trust centralized custodial to pass the asset into, say, a wrap form, wrap BTC, for example, to the proof of stake system. So for this protocol, we want to enable the holder to say that, hey, we can actually stake in a trustless way, self-custodial, without trusting any centralized custodial. No bridging. Number two is that we want the stake, okay, although there's no bridging, the stake is now sitting on the Bitcoin chain. We still want to achieve slashability. So Ed talked a lot about slashing. Slashing is a very important measure of security because what staking is really a collateral. You're putting money down on the table and say, hey, I'm promising that I will do the right job. If I don't do the right job, then you can slash me. So slashing is the number one important thing about security protocol, all right? If someone tells you slashing is not important, don't believe them. Okay, all right. So, however, Bitcoin has a public. It has no smart contract. And most slashing is actually done using a smart contract. All right, so basically we solve this problem by essentially combining various ideas in cryptography as well as consensus protocol innovation to essentially achieve these two properties while not changing Bitcoin at all. So an implicit constraint here is we don't want to wait for the next upgrade of Bitcoin before we can launch our protocol. If that's the hope, then don't worry about it. All right. So we achieved two things. One, fully slashable security, and two, trustless staking. So just like what Ed did, we just stepped through the protocol. Let's step through the protocol from the point of view of the staker. All right. So I'm not a cryptographer, really. I'm a sort of consensus protocol person. But just to make me sound like I'm a little bit knowing some more cryptography, I decided to use Alice. So I figured if I use Alice, then people may think I'm a cryptographer, or at least I know a little bit about cryptography. Maybe I shouldn't do that, actually. Anyway, so Alice decides to stake 1 Bitcoin, okay? She has 1 Bitcoin in her wallet, wants to stake the 1 Bitcoin. And so she submits a transaction, okay, to the Bitcoin chain. So this is a staking contract. So there's no smart contract Bitcoin, but there's a scripting language. And the scripting language allows you to describe UTXO transactions on the Bitcoin chain, okay? And this transaction, a UTXO transaction has output, and you can specify the spending condition on this output. Spending condition is output. So there are 2 spending conditions here. It's an or. Either Alice can unstake in 6 months. So this is through a so-called a time lock opcode, on the Bitcoin. Or Alice can send the Bitcoin to a burn address. A burn address is an unspendable address, okay? So notice that this is a self-custodial contract. No third party is involved here. Alice has full control over this contract. However, there's a very strange spending condition, which is Alice burning her own Bitcoin. If you think about it, that's weird, right? Who would burn their own Bitcoin? Nobody. So let's see why it's there. All right. So to explain this protocol, let's go through the 2 paths of this protocol. One, the happy path, or what Ed said, normal path. So the normal path, Alice will start validating the proof of stake chain. And then 6 months gone by, Alice will now unstake at the end of that time lock, 6 months, and obtain a reward. The reward is usually obtained from the native chain that is staking. All right. All right. So Alice successfully validates, follows the protocol, follows the proof of stake protocol, does everything honestly, very good. However, in the unhappy path, okay, In the unhappy path, Alice turns adversarial. And here, let me illustrate adversarial action by a very simple representation. I'll go a little bit more detail as to why this representation is good enough. And this representation is basically signing two blocks at the same height. Okay? Signing two blocks at the same height. Now, this is a so-called safety violation, or in Nakamoto's white paper language, a double spend. Okay, it's a forking of the chain. And so at this moment, Alice has committed an offense. Okay? Now, actually, this is provable because you're not supposed to sign two blocks at the same height. So if there were a smart contract sitting on the Bitcoin chain, then you will simply send this evidence, submit it to the Bitcoin chain, your L1, and then you use a smart contract to process this evidence, and then you slash Alice, okay? So this is perfectly doable with a smart contract. But there's no smart contract. There's only this one UTXO transaction now on the Bitcoin chain. So how do I emulate the smart contract? It turns out that what we can do is a few steps, okay? First, we need to tie these two systems together cryptographically, right? Because you have the Bitcoin chain, the stake is sitting there, but you have the voting that is happening on the lower chain, the proof of stake chain, okay? So to tie these things together, first we say that, okay, Alice, you have to use, to fulfill the staking contract, you have to use the same private key to sign blocks, okay, as the key that controls the Bitcoin, okay? So this couples the two systems. Second, we build a signature scheme around that private key such that whenever Alice signs on the two blocks at the same height, then anybody who saw the key, the signatures on the two blocks, is a public blockchain, so anybody can see these two blocks. The private key is automatically extracted, okay? So this is the nature of the signature scheme. Once this happens, anybody now can send a fraud proof, okay? This is essentially a fraud proof because the extraction of the private key is essentially a fraud, evidence of a fraud. But this fraud proof is interesting because it doesn't require smart contract to process, because anybody can now spend Alice's money and send it to the burn address. In other words, the second path of the OR condition, okay? So this is essentially an automated fraud proof using Bitcoin scripting language. All right, okay. So this is the unhappy path. This allows you to slash Alice. There's one more slight detail, but which is not really that big, that small, is that the unbonding, so there's an attack which I don't have time to talk about detail, but there's an attack which essentially says that Alice can actually go and attack the chain at the very end of the unbonding period, okay? 1 minute. Okay, that's not good. All right. No, I think I have 5 more minutes. I have 5 more minutes, yeah, not 1 minute. Thank you. All right. So at the very end, okay, you have a problem where you can attack the chain and then unbond, okay? To prevent an attack, we have to essentially synchronize the two chains, the Bitcoin chain and the proof of stake chain. And we synchronize it using a method called Bitcoin timestamping, which we discussed last year, okay? All right, so what's the security theorem? The security theorem is the following, okay? The security theorem says that whenever there's a safety violation on the proof of stake chain, we can guarantee that 1/3 of the Bitcoin stake is guaranteed to be slashed. Sorry, that was typo, not safe, slash. Safety attack, slashing. All right, sorry about that. 2 is that as long as 2/3 of the stake follows the protocol, the POS chain is alive, okay? And number 3, we have trustless staking, which means that Alice, as long as Alice follows the protocol honestly, it will never lose the Bitcoin, okay? So that is the guarantee to Alice. So protection to Alice, number 3, protection for the proof of stake chain, 1 and 2. So this is a two-sided market. We need to protect the both sides. Okay. All right. So what are the core ideas? So let's talk a few 2 minutes about the core ideas of this protocol. One is built on a concept called accountable assertion. All right, so there's a very nice paper, okay, written by Anakat and his friends, all right, called Liar, Liar, Coins on Fire, which precisely advocates this idea that whenever you have equivocation, you can extract the private key. So this is the core idea that we are using in our protocol. So in this idea, there is a notion of a context. Whenever you double sign two messages in the same context, then you extract the private key. However, the question is, what is the context for slashing safety violation in a protocol? Okay. And unfortunately, slashing conditions are very complicated. For example, this is a slashing condition for Ethereum, okay? From a paper by Vitalik and Griffiths, okay? And in this slashing condition, you can see that one condition is essentially should not sign on the same height. So this suggests that you can use the context as the height. But then there are other more complicated slashing conditions that cannot be represented easily using context, okay? So at this point, we got stuck, all right? So with NewsRed, we've been spending like weeks thinking about this. How do we deal with this? Do we have like many, how do we do this? Okay, so it turns out we have a simple solution. And the simple solution is actually quite powerful. Okay, the idea is the following, okay? You take an existing consensus protocol, all right? You look at the finalized block. Instead of trying to muck around with the protocol to make it slashable, you add a so-called finality gadget, which is an extra round of signatures. And these we use a special extractable one-time signature, okay? Such that for the BTC final block, this is accountable, okay? So we force it into the assertion, and these ideas that can be used in many other problems. This is a very powerful construction, I believe. Okay, all right. So the good thing about this finality gadget is now you can apply to any consensus protocol out there. You don't have to be stuck with one. You can do it on Tendermint, Ethereum, and any protocol you like. Really powerful idea. And you can also do restaking, and I'm out of time right now. And we're building this stuff, integrating with Cosmos. And let me just quit. So yeah, so this is a vision. We want to use this protocol as a way to unify the two halves of the economy into one economy. All right, thank you very much.